Hello everyone, Jackie here.
Hello everyone, Jackie here. Welcome back to PhD Racing Lab, where we are doing a big amount of actual renovation, hence why you haven't seen a couple videos out from us in a while. We are back on the M2. One of the things that we're going to be trying out would be these, the Girodisc rotors for the G80 M3, M4, and hopefully the M2 as well. Will be a prototype for us to try out, and I think they said the clearance will be fine, but we're going to test it and see how that works.
So this is a foot, I'm 200 pounds, so this is 200 foot-pound of torque.
Is that how it works?
No. Technically, yes.
That's how that works.
Technically, yes.
These rotors have seen quite a bit of good track use. Yeah, 8 to 9 days, probably like 5 to 6 weekends of track events on these. And they're looking very actually decent shape, all things considered. And we're gonna see how these two-piece hold up against this in terms of weight. Now obviously, this is a brand new one, this is a used one.
Holy shit.
Here we go. Like I said, I literally said this before I went
It's not exactly the same.
It's inconsequential and exactly the same. One of the things we can talk about slightly is you can tell the thin density in terms of cooling vanes. Way more vanes over here compared to a fairly, like there's still a good chunk of vanes, but density is way less, and the channel gaps are way bigger. Alex, you want to explain why that is?
No, it's basically like having a fan with more blades, so theoretically it should move more air. Also, the other thing you have to consider, because you have more ridge here, so technically this is a like structurally stronger rotor too, right? So even though the weight might not be that much different, we'll see how it reacts under load. Speed hole versus speed slots.
There was something about that, wasn't there? Because we were, back when we were working with Brembo on the Supra as well, they're speaking to us about how the designs of actually like the slots versus the holes versus different types of slots actually makes a difference as well.
Yeah, I think what they call it is the slot kind of mechanically recondition the friction surface every time I pass through the pad. It does make like the friction, especially initial, a little bit more consistent. I think that's the approach that they use. We'll see. We'll try them out and see what happens.
All right, we're back at the lab. I'm just still on the lift, and we're going to go on to the next step of the M2's racification process.
That doesn't sound nice. Racification.
What do you do?
You're right, I racify things.
Welcome everybody to Turner from SPL, and we are here to try and shoot the shit. That means try and make a race car even more race car. So Turner, you want to walk us through for customers who are not perhaps familiar with a PhD and our SPL A90 Super program. So many of these may look very familiar if you are a super guy, but if you're not, Turner, walk us through. What are all of these?
And you're right, all of this should look pretty familiar if you've looked at our products from any BMWs in the past. We've got front lower control arms, very similar to what you've seen before. These are a bit longer. The new G8s have a extended track weight. Front end links, towered ends, and tension rods. This car will fit the tension rods, unlike the Supra. Rear design, almost identical to what you have on the Supra. Slightly different links here and there. Very, very similar to the F8 BMW, except with the curved rear upper arms to clear the chassis. But this is our pretty standard BMW kit that comes in just about every race car that you see on the track nowadays. We've got the ability to adjust pretty much anything you'd want to and adjust yourself into a corner if you don't know what you're doing. What we're gonna do today is throw everything on its stock length because everything's been working for you, and then we can adjust out from there. Using these parts, you can adjust your track width, your camber, your caster, your toe, your rear toe sweep, your rear caster.
You have bump steer?
We're not bringing up bump steer today. You can get rid of your bump steer.
So TLDR, if you know what you're doing, these are wonderful. If you don't know what you're doing, set them to the stock length and don't F with it.
You're still gonna get the benefit of adding a spherical joint to the location, so removing deflection, reducing the amount of friction in the joint, and getting a lot more feedback into the chassis. Everything moves a lot freer. Way more confidence. You're going to be able to push the car to the limit of the tire a lot easier because you can feel what the limit of the tire is. So you're still getting the benefit of that even if it's at the stock length. But before you go in and mess with too much, you know, really have a good idea of what you're doing first. And if you do have any questions about that, you can always give me or Jackie a call. You'll give Jackie a call, he'll call me, he'll call you back, you know.
All right, you guys want to do a quick sit rep?
No.
We don't want to, we're upset.
On both the A90s and all the G80s and 82s, I think you're able to take this bolt that's holding the caster rod straight out this side. Guess what they changed on the M2? The piece that is blocking the bolt. So now to take the bolt out, you basically have to take this thing that connects to the subframe.
We're hoping we can take this out.
Oh, we're hoping, because it connects the subframe to the front, kind of the mini crash structure, bumper support.
We're learning.
We're learning
for the community at large.
You know when you're suffering, but you call it learning?
Yeah.
This is it. This is where that bolt goes all the way across this way. The microphone's really close to my face. You can't get a wrench in this way, because it's straight up just, you know, there's things there's way. Yeah. You can't really get through it this way. It's
the other side, the nut is like locked in, so you can't get to the nut.
So you have to go through this, but then they added, well, this piece is now solid instead of having a hole cut out in the middle.
It went deeper than we thought.
You know, when you need to take off one bolt, but to take off one bolt, you need to take out the whole front of the car.
Literally. So what we wound up doing, obviously, was take off the front bumper, which really didn't take that long.
It wasn't that bad.
We were kind of avoiding it, but it's really not that bad. There's only the one plug on this side, all the bolts on the top and the bottom. It slides right off pretty easily. Took this front crash brace off.
It's really just like an oil cooler mount at this point.
It's the oil cooler mount that needs to come off. That's what this front brace is.
You can see it. We have a straight shot access now to said bolt.
But that whole bolt was the reason for all of this nightmare. But honestly, if you know what you're doing, I think this is what, an hour and a half, 2 hour install?
Yes. Honestly, taking off the bumper is not the worst. It looks scarier than it is. And we're making a bigger deal. I'm comedically making this a bigger deal than it is because we're frustrated and of course we're angry. But it's not that bad. It's not that bad.
Thank you, BMW, for complicating this. But thank you also, BMW, for making bumpers really easy to take off.
Hook it to the bolt now, please.
We're professionals. The rest of it's pretty straightforward. Always, whenever you start taking apart the suspension on the front of a BMW, remove this ride height sensor. They're very, very, very easy to break.
Delicate and fragile.
Yes. We have a bracket that this will go into, but definitely remove this first. We're going to use 10 mil, rip it off. So for the towered end, you're going to want a 21 mil. Decent amount of force to break it loose. T40 into the top of the ball joint. Nice and easy. For the inner tie rod, we're going to break this loose. Before we take it completely off, we're going to mark where it was threaded onto. Getting the car back to the spec it was at before we took it off is pretty much impossible, but the closer you can get it to a stock alignment or the previous alignment, the easier job the alignment shop is going to have to put everything back together. And on these modern BMWs, if the toe's off, it can really tick off the computer systems. So do your very best to have the tires pointed straight whenever you decide to either drive it or transport it to the alignment shop, because it does not take much driving at all to really piss off the electronics. With the towered end, you want to make sure the inner is broken loose. Nice and free. On the outer tie rod, you've got this hex head bolt. So to make sure you have clearance to the tie rod, we have one of our 1/8 inch spacers beneath. Because Jackie's car, as you can see, still has the OEM shocks, we're going
for now,
we're going to only be using the knuckle adapter spacer, no bump steer spacers at all, because this car shouldn't have bump steer. washer, and nylock. All of the nylocks at the knuckle are torqued to 180 foot-pounds. We're going to go back through with the torque wrench and torque everything all at once and paint mark everything. We highly suggest paint marking everything that gets torqued down, especially at the knuckle. So next up is the LCA. Process starts the same as the tie rod end, 21 mil to break it free. And then T40. There we go. To get the inboard side of the lower control arm off, we've got an 18 millimeter wrench on one side and an E14 E-Torx on the opposite. Thank you, BMW. And then you have to snake this underneath the tie rod. It's just a rubber boot.
There we go.
And don't lose this because you reuse it. If you're going to be taking this off more than once, it's not a bad idea to get an OE replacement. They're only like $8. And this will basically fall out.
I guess we didn't need that anyway.
The best way to try and set the arms to OEM length is put the bolt over and then adjust the length out. What I'm looking for on this arm is to have the center of these ball joints be about the same length. To install it onto the knuckle, we're using our fancy new SPL stud. Really proud of this design. We're using it in pretty much every lower control arm application. It was designed so that no load goes over any area that has threads, which can be a stress riser. Now all of our spacers that go into the knuckle have a taper inside of them. Slides over here.
Oh, it tapers on the sticks, yeah.
Tapers on tapers. Everything fits really, really, really nicely now. We can torque this thing down a lot harder, and depending on your application and what size wheels you're running, you actually get more roll center adjustment than you had previously. The other cool thing about this is once you install it on the car, it's part of the car now. So whenever you have to replace outer control arm ball joints or change your roll center, all you have to do is remove the nut on the bottom side and slide the arm off. The stud can stay on the car. You're not, using both arms to wrench on everything. It's a lot easier to use. Come up underneath the car, slide it through the knuckle, place the washer over, hold the bottom side while you thread on the top until, thread it as much as you can with your fingers until this hex goes through. You're gonna want a 24 mil wrench and a 12 mil socket. And we're gonna tighten this thing up as tight as we can until the lower ball joint is seated. As it stated in our instructions before, do not, and I repeat, do not use an impact gun on this. So we've got the top torqued. Once the top is torqued,
And just slide the lower control arm back on with the spacers.
and you have to have all spacers since Jackie's still at stock ride height.
Yep.
No spacers above, all spacers below.
So if we want to change our roll center, we move some of the spacer above this.
Correct.
Okay. But the maximum is 2 big ones up top.
Correct.
Got it.
So the tension rod is the same process. Torque the top one, slide your bushing on, torque the bottom one, and then we're going to paint mark these.
So now we're going to, that one
bottom.
kind of goes on the other side, kind of like an opposite, huh?
Yep. So we're once again going to set the arm to OEM length. It's a little more difficult with the tension rod because the bearings are 90 degrees from each other. Slide this side in first. You want to slide directly in because there's some grooves in the chassis that it can get caught on. Definitely suggest putting the bolt on this side in first. And then rocking it back and forth is generally the easiest way to get it lined up. And then it slides on. We'll check for clearance between tie rod and lower control and tension rod right here. At lock and full droop and as much compression as we can get it. If we need to, we'll add some spacers between to allow for clearance. So now that we've torqued everything down, everything's going to get a paint mark from the nut onto the stud.
Well, more interesting discoveries. In order to get this front, what's this, the front trailing arm? the rear, front,
The rear trailing arm.
the rear,
Lower trailing arm.
rear, lower, forward trailing arm, you have to take the brace off in order to get to the nut and bolt that's holding this arm into the subframe. Well, to get to that one, you got to take off the whole brace. And guess what? Because the brace is, you guessed it, the whole entire rear. Like, the brace is so big.
Last generation M3 has a brace similar to this, but it's like this one is crazy stout.
Look at how much triangulation there is everywhere.
And
That's 3D too. And
it's
this like bent upwards in order to give it more rigidity this way as well. Like,
this is really impressive, but yeah, it does make it a little bit of a pain.
Yeah.
But honestly, it's like 6 bolts. So.
which allegedly speaking wouldn't be that bad, except there's a nut holding the entire bottom panel up right where the jack pad is supposed to go.
The last one we need, of course.
Yeah, the last one we need, of course, is hold on by, it's in there. The way to get to that, to get to this panel, to get to the brace, to get to the arm, is we have to take the whole thing off the lift.
Moving to the rear, you have to drop the front of the subframe down to get this one traction arm bolt out.
It's very much similar to the Supra. It's so hard to even spot it on video. You might be able to.
Right in there.
Yeah, right there.
So we removed those braces. We disconnected all of the sensors that are attached to the subframe.
Just in case if you drop them and, accidentally damage anything.
Yeah.
But that is that bolt up there.
And so we used an E18 socket on all the bolts that go into the subframe.
Whoop.
And then we have the rear supported by a trans jack so it can't come down. The rear is basically still touching the chassis completely. And so all we're gonna have to do, remove that bolt on both sides, put the bolt back in, torque everything
Can we
down.
bolt it back in the other way like we do on the Supra?
You can. Yes. So now that we've removed the inboard bolt that's almost impossible to get to, it's time to start working on these outboard bolts. It's a 21 mil on the outboard side, 18 mils on the inboard side. Once you break it free and can see the ball joint spinning on the inboard side, you're gonna have to switch over and use the torque spit, 21 mil wrench, and the T40.
Damn, it's like we really know your stuff.
Pop this arm out. This side's already out, but you have to take
The top one to get to the bottom one.
exactly.
It's really the top one to get to the slightly less top one.
Yeah. So these are the two rear upper arms. We have a curved arm that goes in this location. Barely doesn't clear the chassis here.
Ah.
So that's why BMW put this little bit of a curve here.
Yeah.
And then this arm's the rest of the arms are essentially the same as the F8. So the toe arm's pretty easy. It's the furthest arm to the rear. The eccentrics on the outside, we're going to be putting a lockout, 18 mil on top and bottom. And it looks like 18 mil on the inboard side. It's a through bolt. There we go.
That was easy.
This arm's nice and easy. Tighten that down to 74 foot-pounds. Tighten the OE bolt on the inboard side to 74 foot-pounds. And then we'll eyeball adjust this length until the toe's straight, because the outboard uses an eccentric, so the length of the toe arm stays static. In this one, this is the one arm you don't have to worry too much about matching it to stock length, because this is your toe adjustment. So you just want to make sure the tires look like they're running true and straight. Definitely suggest doing that before you drive the car. So for this rear traction arm, we've already removed the bracing before to get the bolt for the rear upper traction arm off. I'm going to remove this bolt. It's a 24 mil. Now the outboard side is an E14 E-Torx. Single shear bolt. Well, the arm's in double shear, but it's contained nut on this side. Sorry. So this arm's really, really important to set at stock length when you take it off the car. There are benefits to changing the length, like changing your rear bump steer characteristics, the way the toe travels, But if you're running a really, really wide tire setup, if you change the length of this, it makes it very easy to run your tire into the front or rear fender liner, especially on the outer lip, tearing up your paint and stuff. So whenever you install this, install it at the OEM length. Minor changes, very minor changes, can make big toe sweep characteristic changes. And unless you know what you're looking for, try and keep this one at the stock length. It is a very useful tool, but even if you do keep at the stock length, you're getting the benefit of getting rid of this big old rubber bushing. So I definitely suggest breaking the rod ends free before installing this arm. I suggest it on everything, but it's more important on this one. Make sure they're nice and loose before you go and try and throw this in. Seeing as the arms are 90 degrees from each other, it can be a real pain to get these into the chassis if you don't do that first. So what I'm gonna do to get this to line up, just rotate the knuckle back up. And now you see how much, I mean, that was a good 10 degrees that I just rotated the knuckle. If you had set the arm to the length just to go in this hole, so it wasn't, you didn't have to rotate on the knuckle, you're gonna wind up with really crazy bump steer characteristics. So it's really important to set this as close to OE length as possible.
You know, as Turner's taking off the end links on the rear, it's time we face the truth, which is these cars are not that easy to work on. It's not bad. It's not that bad.
The key is, don't be like, I bet I can get this off without taking this other thing off. Just take the other thing off.
It's much easier if you just take everything off. Honestly, you know what would have been really easy? If we just take the whole entire subframe out of the car. But we've done it. We've done it here at PhD as well, so it's not awful. You can certainly do it. But it just takes commitment. So if you are indeed considering getting one of these and want to get into track use and want to do all the SPL and the suite of parts and even more beyond that as well, as we'll show you later on, be prepared.
This is the rear upper traction arm, the non-curved arm that is in the group of the rear upper arms. If you take a look, I have these all set to the same length. What I've done is take one of these arms and set it as close to this length as possible. Obviously I can't slide a bolt through this side to ball joint. And then I took the other arm and matched it exactly, and all of these are locked down. That's how we're going to install them on the chassis. That's going to make sure you don't have any weird toe characteristics side to side. That's when you start feeling the car do just incredibly abnormal things. It's really important. Any arm that isn't perpendicular to the chassis, the arms that are at an angle, like the lower traction arm, this upper traction arm, to get these as close to stock as possible until you know what toe characteristics you're looking for. So one thing that's important to note with both of these rear upper arms, on the back side of this bolt, I have one of our small ring spacers between the rod end and the head of the bolt itself, and it just adds a tiny bit more articulation. So that way it can't
bind. There's a little bit extra of a spacer. Yeah, I see it.
Just a little bit to make sure it can't run into the head of the bolt. Don't forget to do that whenever you install. So notice that the double adjuster is on the outboard side.
Yes.
It states that in the instructions, but I've definitely seen some people make the mistake
of putting this on the inside. Yeah. People do that all the time on Supras. Correction, this arm goes above sway bar, not under. Yes, it goes
in. Sway bar is not where it should be right now either. Yeah. It's all angled up out of the wrong orientation.
This, we move the sway bar bracket to get the arm where it's supposed to go. There you go. Start.
Yep. And this arm will go down into this, like the sway bar sits here.
Sway bar will be in, and this will go in. Yeah. Yay.
Yay. We got it down on wheel stands. All the control arms are on the car. And Jackie and I eyeballed the toe to be straight. We're going to sweep it side to side and check all of our clearances. But the car's down. Everything looks good so far. Still need to put the bumper back on, obviously. But I need to catch a flight. So we're going to hop underneath and make sure everything looks good. All right, we got gap everywhere, looking good. Other side looks good. We're gonna go to full lock again. Love to see it. Everything's looking great, Jackie. So it's been an interesting, 2 total days, I guess. 2 half days, 1 full day.
It's not that bad.
It's not, it really isn't. If you're going to do the full rear kit, it's probably best to just drop the rear subframe. We were just removing the axle away from doing that. It makes it a lot easier to get the sway bar off and get the rear upper arms out and get them torqued down before you put it back in.
Yep, highly recommended doing the whole rear subframe because then it's much easier doing everything. All
Yes.
the bolts come out a lot easier. You're not fighting each other. You're not fighting for clearances. That's what's intended for you to do it. So.
Yeah, and if you are going to get the parts for this car, you can piecemeal it. But if you're going to do that, I definitely suggest doing the full front or the full rear whenever you do it, because otherwise you're going to be dropping stuff multiple times. It's generally best, especially with the front suspension on these, everything being so tied in together. Definitely get all the front stuff together.
Yep.
If you're getting an M2, do not get the caster adjustable bushing. We'll tell you not to, but just don't. You need the tension rod because accessing that bushing is near impossible.
It's not possible.
It's not. It really wasn't that bad. I think this can get, if you follow the instructions I'm gonna write after the modifications, I think this is a 1-day job.
Don't say 6 hours.
Yeah, I thought this was 6 hours. I've done
It's not 6 hours.
I've done the F8s in 6 hours. So I think once I have a strategy down, this is about an 8-hour job. It does have to be aligned afterwards. So if you see labor more than that, that's not crazy. But I'm really excited to see what this will do for you performance-wise. You're about to take it to the alignment shop after this.
Yep.
And you want to do a quick undercar walkthrough? Jackie installed the ride height sensor onto the bracket.
I did that one.
I'm very proud of him. But the clearances here are really tight between everything, just like on pretty much any dual pivot ball joint suspension. So always make sure you check all your clearances. As you can see, we paint marked everything to see if anything ever comes loose. Car is being tracked, it's gonna be abused. We need to make sure everything's safe. And the best way to do that's just to paint mark everything. That way you can tell instantly if anything moved or if you're hearing any noises. We're holding off on the front end links because you're gonna be putting on coilovers next week. So there wasn't much point in putting adjustable end links on when you're gonna have to take them right back off. We've got our tension rod, tie rod in, and lower control arm. Here in the rear, we don't have the panels back up yet, but we have our rear traction arm set to OEM length, upper rear traction arm, our rear camber arm, and our rear tow arm.
He had so much fun in Chicago. He got to see all the sites, like our shop and the hotel and our rental Honda Fit.
I did like the Honda Fit.
Anyway,
Actually, I think scrap this Honda Fit.
no.
Okay. I guess we're in too deep. I'm not making Honda Fit parts anytime soon. So.
Oh.
Glad I was able to come up here and knock some stuff out, learn a few things about the new car, and hopefully keep developing the parts and
We'll let you
keep
know.
winning.
Yeah, we'll try. Thank you very much.